People think betrayal is loud. They imagine screaming, broken glass, slammed doors. But betrayal usually starts quietly. So quietly you mistake it for peace. My name is Monica Williams, and for 12 years I believed I had a good marriage. Not perfect, not like the movies, but solid enough to trust. My husband, David, was the kind of man people admired from a distance. Voice, clean suits, polite smile. The type who held doors open and remembered birthdays. The type who made my coworkers say, "You're lucky." And for a long time I believed them. We lived in a quiet neighborhood where the lawns were always trimmed and the neighbors waved but never asked real questions. The kind of place that looked peaceful even when it wasn't. Our house sat on a corner lot, white with dark shutters, the porch light always warm at night. That house was supposed to be our forever. We met in our 20s when life still felt wide open. Back then, David used to listen to me, really listen. He remembered the little things. How I liked my coffee. How loud crowds made me anxious. How I dreamed of writing one day, even though I never told anyone else. When we married, we promised to grow together. Somewhere along the way, we grew apart instead. I didn't notice it at first. Or maybe I noticed and chose not to see it. David started coming home later. His phone never left his hand. Conversations became shorter, quieter. When I asked how his day was, his answers felt rehearsed, like lines memorized just enough to pass. Still, I told myself this was normal. Marriage has seasons, people say. Not every season is warm. So I adjusted. I worked longer hours. I stopped asking questions that made him sigh. I convinced myself that love sometimes meant silence. The maid came later. David suggested it, said it would take the pressure off. We could afford it now, he said. He wanted us to enjoy more time together. That should have made me happy. Instead, something about it felt strange. I hadn't asked for help. And somehow, the help showed up anyway. The woman arrived while I was at work. David handled everything. The interviews, the schedule, paperwork. All I knew was her name, Elena, and that she was quiet, polite, and efficient. Too efficient. She avoided eye contact with me. Moved through the house like she already knew it. Like she belonged. I brushed it off. I told myself I was being paranoid. That I was tired. That I was imagining things because marriage had taught me to doubt my instincts. The day I came home early, I wasn't suspicious. I was exhausted. Work had drained me. Emotionally. Physically. I stared at my computer screen and realized I couldn't remember the last time I felt rested. So I packed my bag, told my supervisor I wasn't feeling well, and drove home in the middle of the afternoon. I remember thinking how quiet the street looked. David's car was in the driveway. That surprised me. He hadn't mentioned coming home early. I sat in my car for a moment longer than necessary, keys in my hand, heart doing something I didn't understand yet. Not fear exactly. More like hesitation. The kind you feel before opening a door you're not ready to walk through. When I stepped inside, the house felt different. Not messy. Not loud. Just alert. As if the walls were listening. My shoes echoed softly on the floor. The air smelled faintly of perfume. Sweet, unfamiliar, not mine. I told myself it must have been cleaning supplies. Still, my chest tightened. I called David's name once. No answer. I told myself he might be upstairs. Or on a call. Or in the shower. I told myself a lot of things. Then I heard movement. Not footsteps rushing. Not panic. Just the sound of people who didn't expect to be interrupted. My heart started beating faster. Each thump louder than the last. That's when the truth hit me. Not all at once, but like a slow crack spreading across glass. If I had stayed at work just one more hour, I would have never known. If I had texted before coming home, everything would have been hidden. And as I stood there, frozen in the hallway of the life I thought I had, one thought echoed louder than all the rest. This house is keeping a secret from me. I took a step forward. Then another. And with every step, something inside me whispered that whatever I was about to see, there would be no going back. Silence has weight. I didn't know that until I stood there, in the hallway of my own home, feeling like the quiet was pressing against my chest. It wasn't peaceful silence. It wasn't calm. It was the kind of silence that knew something I didn't. I moved slowly, careful not to make a sound. My shoes felt too loud against the floor, so I slipped them off and held them in my hand. The house smelled clean, too clean, but underneath it was that same unfamiliar perfume. Wong. Every step felt deliberate, like the house was watching me make a choice. The living room was empty. Couch untouched. Pillows perfectly placed. No sign that anyone had been there recently. I glanced at the kitchen next. The counter was wiped down, but 2 coffee mugs sat by the sink. One was David's. I recognized the chip on the rim. The other wasn't mine. My stomach tightened. I stood there longer than I should have, staring at that mug like it might explain itself. I told myself maybe the maid had taken a break. Maybe David had company for work. Maybe I was spiraling. But my body knew before my mind accepted it. Something was wrong. I heard it again, movement. Above me. Stairs. I froze, listening harder this time. A low murmur. Not words exactly, but voices. Close together. Familiar and unfamiliar at the same time. My heart started pounding so loudly I was sure they could hear it. I pressed my hand against the wall to steady myself. I thought about calling out. About announcing myself. About pretending everything was normal. But something held me back. Fear. Not of what I might see, but of what it would mean if I saw it. I moved toward the staircase slowly. Each step felt heavier than the last. Halfway up I stopped. My legs were shaking, and for a moment I considered turning around. Could leave. I could walk out, drive away, and pretend this moment never happened. I could give myself more time before the truth arrived. But the truth doesn't wait. The closer I got to the bedroom, the quieter I became. The door at the end of the hall was slightly open. Not wide. Just enough. Light spilled into the hallway. I could hear breathing now. Soft laughter. A sound I hadn't heard from David in a long time. Happy. That hurt more than I expected. I stood there, my hand hovering near the doorframe, my heart racing so fast it made my ears ring. I felt dizzy, like the floor might give way beneath me. This was my house, my marriage, my life, and suddenly I felt like a stranger standing outside it. I leaned closer, just enough to see inside. And that's when my world cracked. David was there. And he wasn't alone. The woman beside him wore the uniform I had seen folded neatly in the laundry room just that morning. Her hair was loose now, falling over her shoulders. She laughed again, softer this time, like she knew she was safe. Like she belonged there. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. I pressed my hand to my mouth to stop the sound that wanted to escape. My vision blurred, and for a second everything tilted. They hadn't seen me yet. I stepped back slowly, my mind screaming while my body stayed silent. My reflection caught in the mirror at the end of the hallway. Eyes wide, face drained of color. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't confusion. This wasn't something I could explain away. And as I stood there, shaking in the quiet, one terrifying thought took hold. How long has this been happening? Right under my roof. I don't remember how long I stood there. Time did something strange in that hallway. It stretched and folded in on itself, like my body was frozen but my thoughts were racing in every direction at once. I had always believed that if something like this ever happened, I would react immediately. Scream. Cry. Demand answers. But I didn't. I stayed quiet. I watched. Not because I wanted to, but because I couldn't look away. They were so close to each other it felt unreal, like I had stepped into someone else's life by mistake. David's voice was low, relaxed, almost gentle. The kind of voice he used to speak to me with years ago, before everything became rushed and distant. That realization cut deeper than the scene itself. The woman, Elena, moved like she had done this before. Nothing about her seemed nervous or unsure. She wasn't rushing. She wasn't afraid of being caught. That terrified me. I stepped back again, my heart pounding so hard it made my chest ache. I didn't want to hear anything else. I didn't want to see more. But as I turned, my foot brushed against the edge of the rug. Shifted. Just enough to make a sound. My breath caught in my throat. I waited, counting seconds in my head, bracing myself for David's voice to call my name. They didn't hear me. Or maybe they weren't worried about being heard. That thought stayed with me as I slipped into the guest bedroom and quietly closed the door behind me. I leaned against it, pressing my forehead into the wood, trying to steady my breathing. This was real. I wasn't imagining things. I wasn't being dramatic. I wasn't overthinking. My husband was betraying me. And the woman he was doing it with was someone who cleaned my home, folded my clothes, walked past my family photos on the wall. I slid down onto the floor, hugging my knees to my chest. My mind replayed moments I had dismissed. The way Elena avoided my eyes, how David insisted on handling her schedule, the sudden lock on his phone. It all lined up too neatly. Then something else hit me. Something colder. I realized I wasn't angry yet. I was curious. That scared me more than anything. Curiosity meant my shock was turning into awareness. It meant my brain was trying to protect me by gathering information instead of falling apart. And part of me needed to know how deep this went. How long? How planned? I stayed in that room until the voices downstairs changed. I heard footsteps on the stairs, laughter fading, a door opening and closing, then silence again. I waited longer than necessary, my heart still racing, my hands trembling. When I finally stepped out, the hallway was empty. The bedroom door was closed now. The house felt different, like it was holding its breath. I walked past the mirror again. This time I looked at myself. I barely recognized the woman staring back. She looked older, sharper, like something inside her had hardened. As I turned away, something caught my eye on the dresser near the bedroom door. Bracelet. Thin gold chain. Small charm. I knew that bracelet. I'd seen it before. Just not on her. And in that moment, as realization slowly settled into my bones, I understood something that made my stomach drop. This wasn't the first time. I picked up the bracelet slowly, like it might disappear if I touched it too fast. It was warm, as if someone had worn it recently. The gold chain caught the light, and the small charm, delicate, intentional, rested against my palm. I had seen this bracelet before. I was sure of it. But never on Elena. I stood there, holding it, my thoughts unraveling one by one. Elena was new. That fact repeated itself in my head like a warning. She had only been working in our house for a few months. David had introduced her casually, like she was an afterthought. "She'll help around the house while we're busy," he'd said. Nothing more. No story. No details. I realized then how little I actually knew about her. I didn't know where she lived. I didn't know who hired her before us. I didn't even know her last name. And yet, she moved through my home like someone who had memorized it. I walked into the laundry room, the bracelet still in my hand. Her cleaning supplies were lined up neatly, labels facing outward, organized, precise. On the shelf above them sat a small tote bag I had never looked through before. I hesitated. Something inside me whispered to stop. But another voice, stronger now, told me I had already crossed a line. There was no pretending anymore. I opened the bag. Inside were a few personal items. Lip balm, phone charger, compact mirror, and tucked into the side pocket, a folded piece of mail. I pulled it out slowly. It was addressed to David. My breath caught. The envelope was old, the edges worn, like it had been handled many times. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. The handwriting alone told me enough. This wasn't random. This wasn't impulsive. Whatever this was, it had been planned. I put everything back exactly the way I found it. I placed the bracelet on the dresser where it had been, like it had never moved. Then I stepped back into the hallway, suddenly aware of how exposed I felt. I was no longer just a wife who had walked in on something painful. I was standing inside a secret. Later that evening, David acted normal. That was the part that hurt the most. He asked about my day, kissed my cheek, ate dinner across from me like nothing had happened. Like he hadn't unraveled our marriage just hours earlier. Elena kept her distance. She avoided my eyes more than usual. When our paths crossed, she smiled politely. But there was something else there too. Confidence. As if she knew something I didn't. As if she was waiting. That night, lying beside my husband, listening to his steady breathing, I stared at the ceiling and replayed everything in my mind. The bracelet. Emil. The way Elena moved through the house. And that's when a thought settled in. Quiet but heavy. Elena wasn't just someone who worked here. She wasn't just a mistake. She was part of something bigger. And whatever it was, it had started long before I came home early. I couldn't sleep that night. Every creak in the house sounded louder than it should have. Every shadow felt like it was watching me. I stared at the ceiling trying to make sense of the day, but all I could do was replay it, over and over again, like a movie I couldn't stop. David's laughter with Elena. The soft sound of her perfume. The way he leaned in, whispered something I couldn't hear. I kept asking myself, had I missed the signs? I remembered the way he started leaving his phone face down on the counter. The way he became protective of it, even around me. He always had an excuse, work calls. Nothing important. At the time I let it go. I told myself I was being insecure. Then there was the sudden need for late-night business trips. The ones I didn't question because I trusted him. I hadn't realized that each absence built the space for this betrayal. And Elena. Her arrival seemed innocent at first. But now I remembered the little things I brushed off. How she never laughed at my jokes. How she always stood a little too close to him. How she never made a mistake, never slipped, never seemed unsure. I ignored all of it because I wanted to believe in my marriage. Because I wanted to believe in David. Because believing was easier than knowing the truth. But the truth had found me anyway. The next morning I went about my routine, but every glance at David felt different. Every word he said felt like it carried a hidden meaning. I watched him closely as he moved around the kitchen, making breakfast with a precision that now felt rehearsed. And when Elena appeared, smiling politely at me, I saw something in her eyes that I hadn't noticed before. Confidence. Control. She wasn't just doing her job. She was aware. Aware of my presence. Aware of my thoughts. I realized something terrifying. This wasn't random. This wasn't accidental. Had been planned. For days, maybe weeks, maybe months. I felt anger rising inside me, but it wasn't the sharp, explosive kind. It was cold, calculating, controlled. And then it hit me, something worse than anger. Fear. Not just fear of losing David. Not just fear of being betrayed. But fear of not knowing how deep this went. I started paying attention to everything. The small inconsistencies in David's stories. The little habits I had stopped noticing. The way Elena lingered longer than she should. Or how David's eyes flicked toward her at the smallest opportunity. Every detail I had ignored before became evidence now. I remembered the bracelet again. The envelope of mail tucked into Elena's bag. The way my husband's touch had felt different. And in that moment, I understood something that made my blood run cold. I had been blind, complacent, and the betrayal had been growing right under my nose while I convinced myself that everything was fine. For the first time I started thinking not about how to confront him, not about how to fix this. I thought about watching, about learning everything before making a move. I wasn't just going to survive this. I was going to understand it. And that was when I realized, the house I had called home for years wasn't safe anymore. It was a trap. And I didn't know who was holding the key. It hit me slowly like ice creeping down my spine. David didn't own this house. Not really. I had assumed he did because he was always so confident, always so controlling when it came to our finances. The cars, the investments, even the vacations. It all seemed under his command. But as I sifted through the small pile of papers Elena had accidentally left in the laundry room, the same bag where I had found the envelope, I realized the truth. The house belonged to my family. Trust. Legacy. My family's money. A house my parents had saved for decades, bought for me before David ever entered my life. And he had acted like the master of it all, while in reality, he was nothing more than a tenant in my family's empire. My heart pounded as pieces started clicking into place. The lavish renovations he insisted on, the insistence on hiring Elena himself, the secretive business trips to meet with contractors. All of it wasn't about me or him. It was about control, power, keeping me blind. And now, standing in that hallway, the reality settled over me like a storm. I wasn't trapped. He was. David had assumed I was complacent, unaware, and obedient. He thought I would stay blind to his lies, to his games, to his betrayal. But the tables had flipped. I had come home early, yes, but I had also stumbled into the secret he never wanted me to uncover. The next time I saw Elena, she was folding clothes in the guest bedroom. She didn't look up when I entered, but I noticed the way her hands paused for a second longer than necessary, the subtle smirk she gave as if acknowledging something she shouldn't. It wasn't fear. It was recognition. She knew I had discovered something. I could feel it. Over the next few days, I began observing David closely, just like I had with Elena before. Every glance, every word, every touch he offered to me became data. I noticed how carefully he moved through the house, how he assumed I didn't know the truth. It was intoxicating. I felt power I hadn't felt in years. But it came with a warning. David wouldn't give up easily. He had already underestimated me. He thought his betrayal would remain a secret forever. But now I was awake. Now I could see. And the most terrifying part, he still didn't know what I was capable of. I started making plans, quietly, methodically, watching their patterns, their routines, the timing of every meeting, every whispered conversation. Elena didn't know I was watching. David didn't know I had figured it out. And when the right moment came, I would strike, not out of revenge but out of necessity. Because in the house that wasn't his, the real power belonged to me. And yet, as I leaned against the hallway wall, heart racing with newfound control, I realized Elena wasn't just part of his game. She was part of something bigger, something I hadn't even imagined. And that terrified me more than David ever could. After realizing the house wasn't his, something inside me shifted. I stopped being the wife who trusted. I stopped being the woman who accepted things at face value. I became a silent observer. Every day, I moved through the house as if I belonged, but my mind was elsewhere. I noticed the smallest details, the angle at which Elena placed the folded towels, the subtle way David glanced at his phone, the timing of their whispers. I watched, listened, memorized. It was exhausting, mentally, emotionally, physically. But I couldn't stop. Not now. One afternoon, David came home later than usual. Elena was already tidying the kitchen. I had been sitting quietly in the living room, pretending to read a book, but my eyes followed every motion. They didn't notice me noticing. Or maybe they thought I was too naive to catch anything. The way they moved together. It was like a dance I had never learned. Every touch, every look, perfectly choreographed. And the more I observed, the more I realized how much I hadn't seen before. The lies, the subtle manipulations, the rehearsed smiles. I began keeping mental notes. Patterns, timings, weaknesses, opportunities. I even noticed Elena's little quirks. The way she always hummed when she was nervous. How she checked the locks 3 times before leaving a room. Small things that didn't make sense until I considered them in the context of David. And David, he had no idea. When he acted as if I were the same Monica he had always known, the trusting, compliant wife. He didn't suspect that I had already figured out more than he could imagine. But Elena did. I saw it in the way she lingered for a moment too long in the hall when she thought I wasn't looking. The brief, almost imperceptible nod she gave me one morning. It was a signal, a warning. She wasn't afraid of me. She was testing me. And that unsettled me more than anything David had done. I realized I was no longer just gathering evidence. I was learning the rules of a game I hadn't even known existed. The house wasn't his. The marriage wasn't mine anymore, at least not in the way I had thought. I began planning my moves carefully. Not out of revenge yet. Not impulsively. But strategically. I needed to understand everything before I acted. I needed to see all the pieces. And I would. 'Cause I had started watching. And once you start watching, you can't stop. Then one evening, Elena left a door slightly ajar. And I saw something I wasn't supposed to. Something that changed everything. And I realized. The affair wasn't the real secret. It was a quiet evening later than usual. I had been observing them all day. David at his laptop in the study. Elena tidying the kitchen, moving with that same strange confidence that had unnerved me from the beginning. I wasn't supposed to be in the hallway. But curiosity, once it takes hold, is impossible to ignore. I lingered just outside the doorway of the guest room, pretending to straighten a picture on the wall, when I noticed Elena watching me from the corner of her eye. Her smile wasn't polite this time. It was knowing. Froze. For the first time I felt truly seen. She walked over slowly, hands clasped in front of her, tilting her head slightly. "You're very observant," she said softly, almost teasingly. I flinched but stayed silent. My throat felt tight. "You've noticed things," she continued. "Things most wives wouldn't even think to look for. And that makes you dangerous." I didn't respond. Couldn't. Her calmness, her control, it was infuriating and terrifying. "You've realized the house isn't exactly his," she said, almost casually, as if revealing it were no big deal. Froze completely. How much did she know? "David thinks he's in control," Elena whispered. "But the truth is different. And you're the only one who's noticed it." Her words hit me like a punch. I wanted to shout, to demand answers, to tell her I wasn't afraid. But something in her tone told me that wouldn't work. That she wasn't just a maid. She was something else entirely. She paused, smiling faintly, and added, "You have a choice. You can act now, or you can wait. But waiting. Sometimes waiting is more dangerous than acting." And then she walked away, folding a towel, leaving me standing there in silence, my mind racing. I understood two things instantly. 1. Elena wasn't the naive, submissive worker David thought she was. 2. There was more at play than just the affair I had walked in on. I sank to the floor, my back against the wall, trying to process it all. What did she mean by dangerous? Dangerous to whom? To David? To me? Or to both of us? The bracelet, the envelope, the precise way she had moved through the house. It all made sense now. Elena wasn't just helping David. She was part of something bigger. Something I hadn't yet uncovered. And I knew in that moment that nothing would ever be the same. The house that had once felt like a sanctuary now felt like a battlefield. And Elena, she had just made it clear, I was in the middle of it. That night, as I lay in bed pretending to sleep, I realized the second truth. The real secret wasn't David's betrayal. It was what I didn't yet know. And whatever Elena had promised was coming, whether I was ready or not. The truth hit me slowly. Not like a sudden blow. Not like the sharp, visceral pain I felt the day I walked in on David and Elena. It was quieter, subtle, dangerous. I had spent days watching, listening, noticing every small detail. I thought I understood the betrayal, that it was just David and the maid. But Elena's words lingered in my mind. The real danger isn't what you think. And that night, the pieces finally started fitting together. It wasn't the affair. Not really. I remembered the mail I had found in Elena's bag. The bracelet. The way David had been so careful about his phone. The late-night business calls. Everything pointed to something bigger. Something hidden in plain sight. I confronted David. Not openly, not angrily. I needed answers without giving away that I knew more than he could imagine. "What's going on with the house, David?" I asked casually one evening, leaning against the doorway. He froze, his expression flickering. Something in his face broke. A small crack of fear he thought I wouldn't notice. What do you mean? He said, smooth at first but strained. Kept my tone calm. The house. The finances. The renovations. Lena. Everything. He laughed, a short, tight sound. You're imagining things. You're overthinking. But his eyes betrayed him. I realized then. He wasn't just afraid of me knowing about the affair. He was afraid of what I had discovered beyond it. The realization hit me. The affair was a distraction. Carefully placed lie. David hadn't underestimated Elena. He had been working with her. Not in love, not in betrayal, but in a deeper, darker scheme. Something I hadn't even imagined. And it involved me. The trust my parents had put in me. The inheritance. The house. The investments. All of it. They were planning to take it. To manipulate me. To make me think I was powerless while they orchestrated a long game to control everything I had. Everything. I felt a cold fury rise in me. But it was controlled now. This wasn't just personal betrayal, it was war. And war required strategy. I remembered Elena's smirk when she spoke to me in the hallway. She wasn't afraid. She was confident. She knew something I didn't yet understand fully. And now I knew what it was. The real secret wasn't David and Elena together. The real secret was their plan. And they had thought I would never see it coming. But I had. I had started watching. And now I had the power to change everything. I could confront them. I could expose them. Or I could wait. And let them make the first move so I could control the endgame. And that's when I decided. I wouldn't let them win. I wasn't just the betrayed wife anymore. I was the observer. I was the strategist. And the moment I had been waiting for. My moment was coming. The next morning I noticed something strange. David had left his phone unlocked, lying on the kitchen counter. And when I picked it up, I saw a message that would change everything. Something Elena hadn't told him, something that was never meant for my eyes. The next morning I held David's phone in my hand. It was unlocked. The message that appeared on the screen made my blood run cold. A text from Elena. Short, simple, direct. Everything is in place. Don't let her know yet. My heart raced. So it was real. Their plan wasn't just about fleeting desire. It was calculated, precise, malicious. And now I had all the proof I needed. But instead of confronting him immediately, I did something he would never expect. I pretended I didn't know. I smiled, made breakfast, asked him about his day. I acted like nothing had happened. Like the betrayal, the lies, the schemes, none of it mattered. And he believed me. David smiled that morning, leaning casually against the kitchen counter, completely unaware. He thought he had won. That smug confidence, so familiar, so arrogant, was intoxicating. Because now the power had shifted. I started observing more than ever. Every movement, every conversation, every glance between him and Elena. They were careful, but I was careful too. I noticed the patterns, the little tells, the cracks in their coordination. I realized something crucial. Fear isn't immediate. Fear is patient. Fear is a slow, creeping realization that you are no longer in control. And they would feel it. Over the next few days, I carefully manipulated small things. Subtle disruptions, questions I didn't answer, hints dropped like breadcrumbs. Every action I took was deliberate. Every word calculated. I let David think he was safe. I let Elena believe she had me figured out. But behind the calm exterior I was planning, waiting, watching. And all the while I had one goal, to reclaim everything that was mine. To make them see that the house, the life, the marriage, they weren't theirs to control. That evening I caught them whispering in the kitchen. Their words were low, conspiratorial. I didn't interrupt. I just listened. They didn't know I knew. They didn't know I had seen the messages. They didn't know I was already steps ahead. And when the right moment came, I would act. Because letting them believe they had won was the most powerful move of all. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was taking control. And the house that had once felt like a trap was now my battlefield. That night, as I lay in bed, I realized the final move would come sooner than I expected. David and Elena were careless, too confident, and when they finally slipped, I would be ready. But one thing terrified me more than anything. I still didn't know who else was involved in their scheme, or how deep the betrayal truly ran. Came home early again. Not by accident this time. Not by fatigue or chance. This time it was deliberate. Calculated. Every step I took through the driveway, every turn of the doorknob, every breath I drew. I owned it. The house was quiet. Too quiet. But this time the silence didn't weigh on me. It energized me. I moved like I belonged because this time I did. David and Elena didn't notice me at first. They were in the kitchen, whispering, their heads closed together as if plotting a heist. The familiarity of their movements would have been painful if I hadn't already turned it into my advantage. I didn't shout. I didn't confront. I didn't crumble. Smiled. They turned toward me slowly, eyes widening. The surprise on their faces was satisfying but fleeting. The real satisfaction was in the calmness I carried. I wasn't angry. I wasn't scared. I was in control. "You've been busy," I said casually, letting the weight of my gaze linger longer than necessary. David swallowed hard. Elena shifted nervously. I continued, slow and deliberate. "I noticed some things. Things that maybe escaped your attention. Their plan had been clever, careful. But it relied on me being blind, distracted, and compliant. I was none of those things anymore." I stepped closer. "I've been watching," I said quietly. "And I've seen everything." David's face went pale. Elena's lips pressed together, just barely hiding her smirk. But they both knew I wasn't bluffing. I didn't yell. I didn't make threats. I just let them feel the inevitable. The power had shifted. The house was mine again. The marriage, at least in spirit, was mine again. I didn't need to destroy them. I just needed to remind them that I was awake and capable of more than they ever imagined. I didn't leave that day angry. I left knowing I had survived. I left knowing I was stronger than betrayal, stronger than lies, stronger than the people who thought they could control me. And yet, I didn't fully forgive. I didn't fully trust. Because even though I had reclaimed the house, the life, and my power, I knew one thing was still true. Secrets linger. Betrayal leaves marks. And some truths aren't revealed until later, when the pieces are ready to fall into place. I walked out that evening under the fading light, keys in my hand, heart steady, and a mind sharper than ever. I had come home early. And I had found my husband with the maid. But when I left, I wasn't the same woman who had walked through that door. I was someone new. Someone stronger. Someone who had learned that surviving is just the beginning. And watching, waiting, and taking control is everything. The house was quiet again. But I knew it wasn't over. Not completely. The game had changed, and I had won this round. But the future still held secrets I had yet to uncover. And when those secrets came to light, I would be ready. Thank you for listening.